world, Waxvillain, Seattle, Washington. You already know what it is. Welcome to Waxvillain Fireside Chat. We got greatness in the building tonight, pulling up all the way from sunny CA, the one, the only Mr. Kelly Finnigan. I got my brother, Mr. Jim, riding shotgun tonight. Keep it locked. We'll kick things off real soon, y'all. Shout out to everybody on the line. We see you. Tonight's special, y'all. Shout out to CUS Courtney. We see you. Mr. Jim's in the building. Let me send this request real quick. There we go. What up, brother?
Can you hear me? What's going on, Wax?
How you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
Good. What show were you at the other night?
It was a metal show, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, my wife is a huge metalhead, so went into the Twin Cities to check some stuff out, and yeah, so wide range of things. Not my, lately I've been going to more, kind of the jazz, blues, and soul shows, but where we get the hangs, right?
Yeah. It's kind of wild. So what I'm fascinated by on that metal scene kind of is like the mosh pit stuff. Like I must have been watching like mosh pit videos at least for a good 45 minutes last night. I don't know what it is, but it's just a really interesting scene. I think we got Kelly Finnigan in the building.
Oh, right on.
There he is.
Hello. Good evening. How y'all feeling?
Oh man, I'm fantastic. I think Mr. Jim is fantastic. It's great to have you here with us.
Happy to be here with you. Definitely.
I got to tell you, the last time I saw you, it took me a minute to connect the dots. But I said, hey, there's somebody like photobombing the Aaron Frazier interview. There's someone behind him.
Oh, that's right.
I love that. Right. I love that.
That was that was spontaneous. I was with Aaron. He was working on his record, which came out, which is amazing. And I happened to be around, so I popped in and said hello. And that was cool. Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you for reminding me.
Oh, man. Had to do it. All right, y'all. We got 42 on the line. If y'all are ready, we'll go ahead and kick things off. All right. I want to welcome everybody to Waxvillain Fireside Chat. Fireside Chats are similar to interviews. However, we take the time to do the research. We want to support and strengthen what's already out there and not duplicate efforts. Tonight is a milestone moment for me. Having the opportunity to sit down and talk with Kelly Finnigan is something that I've wished for since I've started this Waxvillain movement thing. And so I'm just delighted to have Kelly here with us. But truth be told, I'm the low man on the totem pole tonight. I've asked my brother, Mr. Jim, to be my guest co-host for tonight. Now, I'm sure y'all have seen Jim all around the gram. He's always showing great recommendations with music. But when he's not on the gram, he's also an assistant teacher at Wisconsin Eau Claire, editor, writer, producer for award-winning literature journals. His podcast has been featured on the regional stations for NPR, and he's an author penning at least 3 books of poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Jim. Now, folks, when it comes to tonight's guest, in my opinion, we are joined by one of the greatest soul musicians of our time. Kelly Finnigan knew at an early age that music was the way and that he would make a global impact through the music that he would create. Ever since Kelly was a young child, he was all around music. His father, Mike Finnigan, was a legendary keyboardist and vocalist. Virtuoso on the Hammond B3 organ, has shared credits with Etta James, Jimi Hendrix, Joe Cocker, to name a few. Not to mention the music that Kelly grew up listening to: rock, soul, R&B, gospel, all before exploring the sounds of hip hop, finding his way behind the wheels of steel, and learning about vinyl from the OGs. In the next chapter of life, Kelly would join a band from San Francisco known as the Monophonics. Known for crafting a unique blend of psychedelic soul, Kelly would lend his dynamic vocals to soulful grooves like Bang Bang, It's Only Us, and La La Love Me. In 2019, Kelly would embark on a new journey as a solo artist. He would join Coal Mine Records and deliver his debut album, The Tales People Tell, followed by A Joyful. And then there was a flurry of soulful 45s that followed. But what really impresses me most about Kelly, in addition to the music, as I did my research, what I learned is that it's not just what Kelly says, but how he says it. It's his principles. It's the way that he pays homage to the artists from the past while blazing his own trail as a soulful musician moving forward. I think about all the artists that he's mentored and helped them elevate their careers to the next level. And when I really think about it, he's united all of us through the sound of his soulful sounds. I thought it would be fantastic to bring Kelly through as he's on the verge of his third solo album release. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the one and only Mr. Kelly Finnigan.
Oh man, that was all time, my friend. Thank you.
No problem. No
Very
problem.
kind words. Appreciate it. Very nice. Happy to be here. I'm it's been fun to watch you do the thing. Starting off as someone who's just passionate about music in general and wanting to share your knowledge and your taste, and it's been really cool. So thank you for letting me join the long list of really great people you've had on here.
Thank you. We're honored to have you. Kelly, I want to start off with kind of what I had talked about. You know, you had the influences of your father, all those different, soulful music genres in the household. Can you give us a lens into some of those milestone moments that really stand out when you truly knew that music was something that you wanted to pursue further?
It's funny talking about this record. Some people have been asking me more about my background and basically what you're talking about. And it's funny how, looking back as a kid, part of me enjoyed performing and being in plays or doing talent shows and stuff like that, and part of me was so shy. It's interesting that it was really something that was less about performing and more about making people feel, like you said, with playing records. And as much as I loved music as I was a kid and becoming a teenager, it was really about that moment of being, I've spoken about it before, at a house party. And the first real house party where it's like there's no parents, it's 13, it's middle school kids grinding, playing slow jams. This is the early mid 90s. Like there was a certain sound and a scene in modern R&B and in hip hop. And where I grew up in LA, the radio was very specific and played a lot of classic, old school jams and just classic funk, R&B, soul, sweet soul, deep soul, all that stuff. So I mean, it was really that was the big moment, was watching a DJ transform a room and really just play these records that had everybody, he had everybody in the palm of his hand, and I'd never seen anything like that. I'd seen a lot of amazing musicians, performances, concerts because of my father, but that was different. That felt different, and it just was so attractive to me, way more than what I was exposed to, which is so interesting. And I think that's just how we all are, right? It's just like you're around something and you appreciate it, but it's something completely new that you know about and you love, but I'd never seen a true DJ rock party. And that to me is a really pivotal moment. That really definitely turned a switch.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it myself. I remember the first time I bought cassette tapes on my own, and they were the only two I could play. I also remember when my mother dropped me off at like this hip hop concert when I was 12 years old. Me being a dad now, like, I don't know how that happened, but those were the moments that really kind of sparked these thoughts. So I'm with you on that. I'd really like to. There's 3 points that I think are really pivotal. One is when you start DJing. Two, life before joining the Monophonics, and then there was work with, I believe it's the Destruments. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, like I spoke at that party, and then right around the same time, I think it was kind of just, Kisma or whatever you want to call it. I had DJ Jazzy Jeff do this routine on TV. He was doing a routine with the Rob Bass and DJ Rock. It Takes Two.
Yeah.
Did it, and then cutting it up with the Lynn Collins sample, and that just like off another moment right at that same time where I was like, okay, I really want to do this, and I started, doing extra chores, washing extra cars, make extra money, and to save up and buy some turntables and often so I could have it all in one place. And started and then the hard part where it's like, oh man, I got to find a lot of records because I had records, but once I was really lucky, and I was smart too. I look back at it, I got the contact of that DJ who was at the party,
Yeah.
who was so impressive, and I touched base with him, and he literally was like, hey, call this guy. He kind of showed me the ropes. He taught me the way. Hit him up. And I hit this guy up. And it's always impressive because I'm calling now. I'm 14, calling just a grown up out of the blue. And basically, he was so cool and just took me to gigs and showed me how it worked. And
Wow.
just kind of like taught me, hey, these are the do's, these are the don'ts. This is what people expect. This is the right equipment, blah, blah, blah. So that person really showed me the way. And, that from there, me and my friend, we kind of started a little business, started rocking parties of friends. We started networking to schools around the LA area, and we ended up DJing some actual like school dances of kids, our own age, which would always like blow minds when they walk in the gym. It's like, they'd be like, you guys are the DJs? They're like, yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah. So that was a really fun time. And just getting to learn, what music works, why things work, why people like things, why people react a certain way. Like there's just a certain, I think any DJ would tell you, it's like, it's just something you kind of figure out. I unfortunately I didn't stick with it too long, because of where life took me, but I've gone back to it on and off, and I still love just playing records for people. And I think that's what it's all about. It's about doing something and watching people react and really like turning people on and opening their eyes to an artist they didn't know existed, a certain subgenre or a sound. Just, it's really exciting. And I think that's why we are all here, is we not only love music, but we love sharing music. So as soon as I saw the magic in that, I think that just took me down the rabbit hole of, what if I could do that with my own music?
One quick question I wanted to ask you. So I had read that one of the kind of lessons that you were taught in terms of vinyl was to focus on the labels, read everything on there. And so once you had that bit of information, now you kind of had a little bit of a brighter flashlight, I would say, to kind of look around. What were some of those labels that you first discovered that really moved you?
I mean, looking back at when I could actually really start buying like records with cool samples and things, I think something like Flying Dutchman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely got heavy into like jazz, funk, and soul jazz first, So it was like the obvious Prestige and Verve and Blue Note, but also like CTI and anything. Yeah. Kudu, the subsidiary, the Kudu stuff.
Love Kudu.
All of that stuff obviously spoke to me. I mean, and obviously all the big labels always had great, art. So, Black Jazz. I got older, I started to figure out other cool labels. Out of Oakland, Black Jazz was a cool one. But those were all a little bit out of my price range in the beginning. You know what I mean? It's like that's the struggle of being a young guy trying to do records. It was like, oh man, $8 is a lot of money.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say those were the first that really caught my ear and eye, and I was definitely hunting for a lot of that
Okay. Okay. And what about the Destruments? Because I was trying to map up the timeline. When does that work? And give me a lens into your work with the Destruments.
So yeah, that was I went boarding school out in Vermont. I was born and raised in LA, and I started going to school at a school that was local to me where I grew up, and I kind of just wasn't taking school serious. I was so just doing the classic stupid young kind of just like my life. All I wanted to do was music and listen to music and obviously hang out with girls and do dumb stuff like that. I was just not going to class. I wasn't applying myself basically, so I failed out of the school and I ended up boarding school. So that's kind of what I talked about with not being able to continue down the DJ path. So once I graduate and I go to engineering school and I'm kind of just back in LA trying to figure out what my next move is. A good friend of mine who I went to boarding school with, who's a fantastic musician, fantastic drummer, multi instrumental cat, like just really talented, named Jesse Kramer. He moved out from the East Coast, and we met through a mutual, through another musician, a gentleman named Sean Wilson. So me, Jesse, and Sean just vibed right away as like a trio of just kind of like the music we liked, and you just start to hang out as a group of people and musicians. We just kind of sat down, keyboards, bass, and drums, and just started messing around. But it really like was more focused studio thing. We never really tried to tour or we would play little parties for friends and stuff or backup MCs. We got to back up like Souls of Mischief and some other dope people, Planet Asia and
Wow.
Murray. Yeah, we got to do some cool stuff. But it was really more of a studio project, and it was just a love of hip hop, funk, jazz, soul.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Rare groove, sample music, like whatever's got a good vibe. All that same stuff we all like, live music. So Destruments was just that beginning stage of meeting like-minded people and being like, yo, let's do something. Like this is kind of the only way to start down this path some way, is just kind of how to figure out how to do this, right? It's like you got to, even though I had, like I said, I went to engineering school. It's like I knew what I wanted to do. I just knew the best way to become good at it was to do it.
Yeah. So you said Vermont, and I had a moment because I grew up in like Albany, New York. Did you ever go up that way?
Definitely up by Albany and Rochester.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple times. I mean, it's amazing up there. It's a beautiful country, beautiful part of the states, and I enjoyed my time. You know what I mean? It was a different experience, but as much as it kind of pulled me away, it kind of helped me just grow up. You know what I mean? Like become independent. But so by the time I graduated high school, I was kind of a couple steps ahead of friends who had stayed home, and because there's just you're given a little bit more responsibility in those like boarding school situations. You're definitely monitored because they're now responsible of you. Your parents have like handed you over. But in terms of just they give you a schedule and you gotta show up and do that. So
Yeah. As a multi-instrumentalist, at the intersection of all your musical influences, your passion for arranging and producing, and respect for session players, I really wanted to kind of learn a little bit about when you first started singing, because I understand that wasn't until you were in your 30s. Can you talk about that chapter of life and how you kind of evolved, your skill set as a vocalist? And how did that kind of extend your musicianship as Kelly Finnigan?
Um, yeah, you know, like I said, playing with Sean and Jesse, it always felt very motivated by making cool songs, cool records. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing cool recording. So, you know, as much as I said we would do little shows, I just kind of looked at myself, kind of like, oh yeah, I play keyboards, I produce, I write. I just kind of looked at everything so studio driven. Um, you know, and sometimes we would have songs with like little vocal things. Nothing major though. Nothing where you'd really like kind of put it in the third gear. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a lot of like la la, like a lot of just smooth stuff. You know, a little more like in the neo soul pocket.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But he does who's like unsure about singing. You know what I mean? Like anything else where you're kind of like, well, I think I have sense of what I'm doing, but I'm a little unsure. So you dip your toe in the water, you know? And just, you know, as I got a little older, I definitely didn't, you know, I didn't want to sing in a band. It's so funny, but it obviously sounds very intriguing, right? Like when someone presents you with something, even though you haven't thought about it, it's like, whoa, I've never been on stage with like a horn section and like, you know, a big band and like all these guys are accomplished. They went to college, you know, the guys when I met Monophonics, like I was very, even though I grew up around great musicians and Jesse and Sean were great musicians, those were like my buddies. You know how it is. It's just like, hey, I've known those guys a long time and we hung out. It was kind of like, whoa. And you know, it makes you step up, obviously. So there's that. Just like, well, you better level up right now if you want to get down. Because I came in as a sub. Those guys, their keyboard player was moving to the East Coast at the same. It was like around the time everybody was going to Brooklyn.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
To Brooklyn. um. So he moved, and they were looking for someone, and they just hit me up as like, hey, we just need someone to cover these 3 shows in Tahoe and Reno, you know, around that area. Did the shows, and it was just had a great time. It went well. Sang one song in the set. The rest of the set was instrumental. It got a really big, you know, it got the biggest reaction, as vocal tunes do.
Sure.
And at that point, I've done a little bit of singing in front of people, you know, very little, like a few times. So it was still very new, and it's kind of just like being thrown into something and being like, okay, I think I can do this. And obviously, I've said this. I'm lucky because my dad was an exceptional singer,
Right.
incredible. And it's kind of weird, like watching somebody do something through your whole life is more educating than you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's like you sit and watch someone work a forklift for 25 years, and then someone's all of a sudden is like, yo, can you do this? Like, I'm not saying you're just going to get in and do it perfect,
Right.
but you're going to know what you're doing. So the time I sat down and started playing, and it felt intimidating, but I felt like, oh, I can at least fake this till until I figure it out. And I hope people understand what I'm saying. It's like anything else. It's like, hey, you're not the biggest and the strongest guy on the team, but like you're gonna be the Rudy on the team. You're gonna hustle the hardest. You're gonna run everywhere.
Yeah.
You're gonna try and even if they're gonna knock you down. So that was my approach. Was like, hey, I'm just gonna go at this with as much energy and love as possible. So any of my other shortcomings can be, you know what I mean, aren't as no, because it's like, hey, this guy's really like loving what he's doing.
Kelly, I want to put spin on it because I really pay attention to when people speak, how they say things, and when you were kind of just confessing this know-how when you were young that you wanted to do this. Again, that was a moment for me where like the way that you said it, like if people didn't believe, you must have looked at them crazy. And I wonder, did you always have this confidence once you knew what you wanted to do? Even though maybe singing was kind of a new territory, you just felt like there were no ceilings when you looked up. Did you have that kind of confidence despite being new and knowing that yes, I'm going to grind hard, I'm going to put in the work, but I know I can do this.
Yeah, yeah. I I I think it's the only way you approach something you truly believe you're meant to do. And belief it's a strong word, because a lot of people can say and go, well, I believe. It's like, yeah, but do you know, like, does because I mean, I still think about the days of having a day job and just, man, I would just sit there and wish and hope and think, and it's crazy. So, it's it's almost like you have to believe. You have to believe. Like, you have to know that you're gonna make it. I know it sounds so it's so like sad, and it's so complicated, but it's just like you have to know it. I think it's the only way to really operate, and especially in a business like, music or entertainment or arts or anything where it's very competitive and there is a great deal of luck involved. I do truly believe there is. Like, there's so many talented people out there that really don't ever get heard. And it's one of the most frustrating things with art, right? It's like all these artists and records, and you're constantly talking about these old records, reissuing them, and it's like, this group was as good as any other group. Why was it only one? It's like it's man, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that, Kelly. And I think like the authenticity behind everything that you just said is so like motivating, because when it comes to doing things, passion and confidence, to your point, there's levels to it. There's levels of I can do this. And that was really cool to hear you kind of open up and be vulnerable about that. I got a couple more before we switch over to Jim, but you noted Isaac Hayes, Curtis Mayfield, Sly and the Family Stones, and I really have this respect and fondness for being precise when identifying genres of music and subgenres. So when I say psychedelic soul, I'd like you to tell me what it is that moves you so much about the music that you heard, and also what moves you to take that torch and carry it forward, but put your spin on it.
Well, obviously those three guys really, in their own way, like, started a new path and helped start a new sound. And, in their own right, they're so similar, more similar than I think people think of. Especially when I talk about someone like, everybody easily associates maybe a song or certain things with artists. And I think especially with someone like Isaac Hayes, because of his life later,
Right.
Him being a part of like South Park and all that kind of stuff, I think people sometimes go right to that instead, or they go to Shaq.
Yeah.
Isaac Hayes, I'm talking about, is like the mid 60s, like playing on Otis Blue and playing with Booker T and the MGs when Booker T's away at Indiana University at college. And he's filling in, and like him and Marvel Thomas becoming more of the keyboard players at Stax because Booker's not there. And then obviously Booker becomes unhappy and moves on to become a producer. So it's like, I'm talking about that Isaac Hayes. Obviously, when we get to Hot Buttered Soul, that's just a door busting open, changing record. I don't know if people realize that record charted on multiple different charts, like the top 100 chart, the jazz chart, the R&B chart. That was like a very unique and special record, especially for 1968. It's like, that's pre-Woodstock.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful record for the time, sonically and just everything about it. So it's like there's that. Obviously, Curtis. I mean, yeah, these guys. It all turned to like the late 60s and into the 70s. Obviously, to me, Sly Stone is the godfather of psychedelic soul, because I think he's the one that really made everybody look around having a multiracial band, having such a soulful sound with multiple singers and horn section and just a amazing band, you know, with like such a almost like a rock drummer who's funky.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, you weren't seeing a lot of women playing trumpets in bands. So to see like just the whole look right away, and then they could all basically sing outside of the drummer. I mean, not really the sax player, but just such a talented group of musicians. And he's writing these amazing songs. And, you know, George Clinton, he's professed, like he went and saw Sly and the Family Stone. He was on LSD and it changed his life. And that moment forward, he wanted to play that kind of music. And he started Parliament, he started Funkadelic, and that started that path. You have Norman Whitfield in Detroit,
Right.
taking on that like role at Motown with the Temptations and Barrett Strong and making all these great records. And it's like when you think about psychedelic soul, like I said, Hot Buttered Soul, and then the Curtis record from 1970, it's like these are all pinnacle records to me of the genre, of people who are really starting to push the envelope. Just looking at it like, hey, you know what? There's a culture and a movement, and this has to do with like fashion and drugs and sex and freedom and just this like we're breaking away from the chains of like America that everyone's supposed to kind of like walk this certain path and you know don't talk about that and unless doors like don't wear dresses too short, don't you know what I mean? It's like I think people forget like up until even into the mid 60s America was still very hey let's keep it cooler. So like you see all that, I think there was a real sense of freedom. And obviously, there's also this great big explosion of technology that's going on in studios.
Yeah.
The Beatles are making these records that are like really experimental and mind blowing and doing stuff and creating new sounds and textures. And so, I mean, it's a really inspiring time, honestly, man. I mean, it's like you think about what's going on culturally and musically. It's pretty incredible. It's a magical time.
Agree. No, that's really cool. And then what about looking forward? I mean, when you talk about carrying the torch forward and your sound,
Yeah.
what's most important to you, and you know, kind of what's that staple?
I think it's honestly the best thing I can say is I think it's about continuing to push the boundaries, and I guess that's like the best advice you can like any artist would give you is like, hey, continue to grow, continue to take chances, keep your sword sharp. You know, I think that's what happens is like you think about that young, hungry energy we all had, and it's like I really try and keep that in the front of my mind because it's like I've always said, like, listen, great artists continue to make great art through their whole life. We all appreciate that. But why is it that there's just always something about those first couple records? Like, so many artists, like, it's not that the fifth record wasn't great or the seventh. It's just there's something magical. And it's like, I always talk about that as an artist. So it's like carrying the torch, especially with psychedelic soul, is like continuing to educate people and really like give you some heavy psychedelic music that's soulful, but like I said, like just push the boundaries. Love to see the genre grow and more people to, you know, I'd love to see more groups kind of even if it's one song on a record, take that sound on.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Now, when it comes to your production, I've always said that I could spot a Kelly Finnigan record a mile away. There's something that's really grand about the production, that cinematic edge to it. And you know, until recently, I've always felt like, man, when Kelly puts out an instrumental record, it sounds different than the other instrumental records that come out. And I think that's just kind of like a tribute to your passion around the work of session players. But I'd love to kind of get a lens into the equipment and instruments that you're using to make these, you know, soulful grooves, and kind of give us a lens into your process. Are there any producers that perhaps maybe influenced you and there's a certain tip or trick that you've always kind of incorporated into your sound?
Man, I mean, I'm really someone who I really take engineering on from such an artist standpoint.
Yeah.
Like, even though I went to school for it and I understand a lot of it, I really look at, I think because of the artist in me, it's like, well, I don't want to be the same every time. Like, I worked in big studios in LA. I've seen, in terms of like being a runner, assistant engineer, and being in some sessions with big bands. And it really is like, they put the mics on the drum kit, and like, that's the mics on the drum kit. Like, they might change the snare or some cymbals, but that's kind of how it goes. I just, man, I can't rock like that. Like, I really like to change things up. I really like to experiment and try new things. And it's cool to hear that I have a sound and you can recognize that. But I think part of what I do is just like not doing the same thing. That would be my tip or trick. Is I really enjoy spending a whole day moving mics around the drum kit and playing, and this like, what does this sound like over here? What if I do that? Like, that kind of stuff makes me like, oh, I'm giddy to do it. So, I guess that, like, my tip would be, if you have the access to, recording yourself, and you can play the drums, or you have a friend, spend the time with instruments, think about how they sound naturally, sit next to it. That's like a big thing that a lot of old school engineers do, is like, they'll go in and like sit next to the amp, sit next to the acoustic guitar, sit somewhere near the drums. You know what I mean? Like, to really, like, what does this sound like inside this room? Like, really try and figure out the natural sound before you put the mic on it. I mean, that's definitely something I know. Like, the great recording engineer, in my opinion, was a gentleman named Al Schmidt. And when Al Schmidt started, it was literally like one track. Like, when he first started in New York City studios, it was mono recording. And that was the beginning of his career. And he watched it go from obviously mono. He just passed only a few years ago. He lived to be well into his 80s, and he was still working and doing good stuff to his 80s. He had magic ears. And I got to watch him work and listen to him talk, and he was very big on listen to the instrument in the room. You know what I mean? Like, make sure you capture the and try to capture it in the most natural way. Don't depend on compression, cueing, and don't depend on all these other things. Just try and capture it in the most natural way. So, I mean, I definitely like to keep things organic. I keep things simple. I don't like to put a lot of things. I don't like to put a lot of compression. I just like to capture things as natural as possible.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of engineers, producers. Man, there's so many. There's so many good producers, because obviously I love all music. I would say some that obviously stand out are Lee Scratch Perry would be someone I would talk about for sure.
Okay.
Obviously, like Isaac Hayes or Curtis Mayfield. I really love a gentleman named Bert Burns. Another great gentleman who wrote and produced a lot named Jerry Ragavoy. George Kerr from New Jersey, a great producer. I mean, obviously, and then there's just like the classic ones, like a Jerry Wexler.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? I'm forgetting the gentleman because I'm getting older from fame. Rick Hall, Clarence Reed down in Miami.
Yeah.
All the Stax producers, Carl Davis. I mean, I could go on and on. It's like, there's definitely people I could look at. Oh, well, I love more, but I really just appreciate who I'll say is always fascinating to me, and I think you found this more back in the day, was producers who really, like, they didn't play an instrument, they didn't know music theory.
Yeah.
They had really good ears. To
Yes.
walk in a room and say, that's a good song. This is good. This arrangement's good. And they knew the right musicians, and they just had good taste.
Yeah.
People don't realize, like, there's more of that back then than people realize. Like, this guy doesn't know anything about music per se, like in terms of playing an instrument or writing, but he's got golden ears.
Yeah.
They
I
hit
mean,
right.
that's the case for a lot of these, one-off soul records where it was like I just grabbed the girls that lived down the hall, threw them in and it was magic.
Yeah.
You can't replicate that stuff. I call that the charm factor, where we're doing the best we can with the best we have, and in some cases, there were some really standout individuals that were involved in those recordings. But I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah, I like charm factor. That's so important. I mean, we talk about it with some of these great records. When you start to play out, you want to play these cool records, and sometimes you'll sit down and you'll start to play through the song, and you go, "Oh, it's the recording." Like, it just doesn't transfer over. This doesn't sound cool. Like when we play a bar band or something, it doesn't have the tones and the vibe and the charm.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, there's just magic in that record.
Well put. Well put. Mr. Jim, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Talk about the new album. Jim? Oh, that's crazy. I think he's like frozen. Hold on.
Oh no, Jim.
Yo, that's wild. I thought he was just staring at us the whole time like that.
Oh no.
Hello?
There you are.
Back in the
All right.
building.
There we go. All right.
Yo, did you know your screen was frozen for like the first 30 minutes?
Yeah, I punched a request back your way because I'm sitting here like commenting. I'm like, well, I'm just kind of hanging out.
I love it. I love it. Let's roll with it.
All
You're
right.
good.
Hey man, it's really interesting. Listening you talk about the producers and those engineers. Went from talking about Isaac Hayes, Curtis Mayfield, the things that really kind of lay lines with the psychedelic soul, and then you mentioned like Jerry Rogovi and Burns, and that idea of the songer, the shorter, more kind of poppier songs, which really feels like a segue right into the new album right here.
Well done, Jim.
I'm good at the plug. I'm good with the plug here. But thinking about it, and just as I was listening to you and Wax talk about about the sound or that magic and that charm and how that a lot of that is kind of captured in place. I was also thinking about the songwriting for the new album here, Love Was Born, and that idea of knowing that it's been written or songs were written with collaborators, on both coasts and the like. And I want to know, if you could talk a little bit about that idea of how place informs some of your collaborations and how that kind of dovetailed into the actual songwriting process.
Yeah. The first record happened in such a way that I was just kind of writing. And, the first record, I wasn't trying to make a record, as I've spoken about it before. I was just writing, just kind of these songs were piling up. And Terry kind of hipped me to like, hey, you could probably make a record here soon if you keep going.
Sure.
So with this, obviously, it was more like, all right, let's start this next process. And I knew from, hanging out and doing some shows with Joe Crispiano, who I've been friends with a long time. I met Joe back in 2016 when we opened up for the Daptone Soul Review in France.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that was amazing. Sharon and Charles and Son and Star and who else? Antibalas, like incredible. Yeah, it was an incredible show.
Wow.
So we got to open for that and met Joe and got to get to know him and stayed in touch. And then he ended up playing with me for some shows for my last record. And so yeah, I reached out to him and I visited him out. He lives out in Staten Island. That's where he's born and raised. And yeah, I mean, of course, going out to New York and just like that's such a vibe. Being on Staten Island, what Joe brings as a musician. For people who don't know, Joe was in the Dap Kings starting in about, I want to say 2015 or so, around that time. So yeah, I mean, he's the thing where he has such a style and a really cool ear. We immediately kind of got in a nice groove and started writing these songs, but also just kind of throwing ideas around, and really more of the ideas that were more developed ended up being like Walk Away From Me, Get a Hold of Yourself. um let's see, those were probably the two that were the most developed going into like me going home, you know
Mm-hmm.
putting them down for demos. But working with him was really just I mean, Joe's such a cool guy and just fun. We had a great time. Ate Italian food every day. Just want to make it clear that's how that goes. I literally by the third day was like, "Hey, what do you think about like some Thai food?" He's like, "No, I'm good. We're gonna have more." I was like, "Okay, I'm eating Italian food this whole trip. Fine." His mom is an amazing cook. So that was just fun, man. I mean, obviously getting out of your surroundings, getting into a new place, working with someone that you know but you've never written with, it was all just inspiring, and I think it was the right kind of way to approach some of the songs for the new record. And
And yeah, obviously. Oh,
no,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I know also, I mean, obviously, besides Joey having those some credits there, I know that the guys from the Ironsides also wrote and
Yeah, I was
collaborated
gonna
with them throughout
say,
the album
those
too.
songs done. I got back to California and I sat down with Joe and Max Ramey, and those are the guys who started the Ironsides. I mean, I've known those guys now since 2011. The first time was when they came into my studio, and it's been really cool to watch their evolution into like putting out an amazing record last year, and it's been really cool to watch that. But yeah, me and Joe and Max. For those that don't know, they've played on my last record. They've played on a lot of my songs, from like Leave You Alone to I Don't Want to Wait. I mean, Max has basically played bass on every one of my songs. Joe's played guitar on most of my records. Um, those guys are big. I've done a lot of stuff with them. I love working with them. So yeah, we wrote a handful of songs. Songs by myself. There's covers that I recorded. So yeah, it's a nice even spread of bringing in some people that are, I think it's important to be around people who inspire you, right? It's like you don't want to feel like you're bringing in people and you're like, okay, guys, it's like, get it together. It's like they're going to be the ones that are like, all right, come on. So it's like that's what you need. You want to surround yourself with good people.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of collaborators, I mean, there's obviously some familiar faces from the first solo album, but there's also, I mean, Jay Mumford's on this record this time around. Obviously, you still got some Lewis doing some of those arrangements. When you're talking about that cast of musicians and collaborators and that kind of space, um, how does that help shape then the ultimately not just the music itself, but then the sound or the feel? I know you're talking about this being a full album rather than a collection of songs like your debut. So can you talk a little bit about that kind of that element to making this feel whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of producing records is figuring out, you know, who you work with is important. You want to bring in people who can achieve what you're looking for. You can communicate what you're looking for, and they're going to bring not only what you're looking for, but they're going to offer more. I mean, that's what makes great session musicians great session musicians. Anybody can kind of just show up and do like, okay, this is what this needs, and I'll collect my check. But it's like you want to bring in people who are going to get excited, and they're going to want to make the song better. They're going to want to come up with great parts, timeless parts, things that you don't forget. And I think that's just such a big unspoken thing when it comes to the records that I love, that you love, we all love. Is like, you know, a lot of those records, especially back in the day before bands really evolved and it became more of a norm for the band to play on their own record rather than bringing in like heavyweight studio people, is just that was what you did. It's like, hey, if you want this, you bring in this guy. If we need this, we call her. So I love working with the people I love. You said a lot of names on record, like Kamiko Joy and Vivica Hawkins, they've been singing on backgrounds for me and Monophonic. They've sang on Sexto. They've sang on Lana Royale. They've sang on, I mean, they sang everything I've done. I love them, and that's why I bring them in. We have a really great thing. And it's the same with the string players and a lot of the music on this record. Jay was really someone who I really admire. I'm a fan of, he's a student of drumming. He's a student of, music and just the art of drumming. And that's like the tones and the style and the feel. And like, I really appreciate his approach. And I thought bringing him into the fold would only kind of bring a new and exciting aspect. And he did exactly that. And he was great to work with. We had a lot of fun, You're in a room like 12 hours hanging out, making music, things. It's really cool. It's a lot of brain, work with the day. But we had a really good time. And I think that's just the key, right? To making these records is just bringing in good people, man.
And it, like with that too, how much latitude were these guys given in that space? Like, I mean, that idea, right? You're moving beyond the chart. There's not a chart here, but you're still guiding.
We sit down and I show them the song. So it's like, here is the song. Like, here is the arrangement. Here is like the chords. Here's the key that we're in. Tempo is a question because you're like, hey, it feels good to play this like this on the piano for a demo, but how's it going to feel once we actually start playing together? So I like the feel and like there's just the simple things you got to answer right away. And once you can get past all those questions, people can start to like suggest, hey, how do you like this as a part? And it's like, oh, that's cool. And that kind of like snowballs, Then it's like, as soon as somebody, maybe Jay, starts playing a cool, oh, that's cool. Okay, this someone, it just inspires. And there's just a lot of like delegating and like, hey, what if we tried this? Okay, cool. But that's, like I said, that's why you bring cool people in. They got cool ideas. That's why you're paying them, is because you want the cool ideas. So it's like, it's kind of like handing people basically the outline and all the lines and everything of like this painting.
Yeah.
Hey, I think I want to use these colors. I want kind of mood and vibe, and then you allow them to help you paint. Like they have lines and they know where they're going because the song is written, but there's definitely freedom, and I can think of a moment for every song on that record where Jay or Jimmy or Max or Joe or somebody suggested something that made a difference in the song.
Yeah, I think you can hear those moments, of those flourishes. It just again adding to that soundstage, flesh to bone, through the entirety of the record. Speaking in those kind of spaces, that idea of the track the running order. I mean, prove my love. As soon as I heard it, as soon as I got a chance to hear some of these tracks, and just that start, it's such a big cinematic, but has a different feel. It's got it's got a compact swing to it, if you will. If you're talking mixing the baseball
I like that
language in there with
like it. You let it get up side, you take that to right field.
It's
over to third.
It drives. So like when you're doing that, right, and again thinking this idea as an album in total, how did the actual lineup, if you will, for the album, in terms of getting that sweep and that movement, how did you come about with the track listing here to tell that story? If we're thinking about these things as chapters in a book.
I think the biggest thing that you like deal with when you start to decide to do this, before I get into specifically that, is like, I'm very proud of my first record. I'm aware of its praise and like the way people feel about it. So you're very careful of like, well, I could do this thing again because I can do that. I can go in and play all the stuff myself, but it was really just like, I did that. Like what? There's no challenge. Now I'm just kind of like exercising this thing that it's like, well, I know I can. because I can do it. That is like, it's like, listen, I understand there's restrictions, so I don't want anybody to listen and be like, well, it's not as there's hire musicians. It's like, I know things cost money, they take time, but because I had the option and I'm with a great label like Coleman and Terry gives me a leash in order he trusts me, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, cool. Well, I'm do it this way because it sounds like it sounds different. It sounds challenging. It sounds fun. Monophonics works different, right? We make records, so it was just intriguing in that way. And then it was just kind of like, you know, to me, soul music. Everybody talks about like, what is soul? Like, I answer a lot of questions like, what does soul mean to you? What is soul? And it's like, well, listen, it's feeling, it's emotion, it's pain. I personally think it's pain, and then yes, it's joy, and it's overcoming, and it's love and heartbreak, and it's all these things. It's the human experience wrapped up in like this deep groove. But it's like a thing, something that was a part of this record for me was like, okay, I really don't want to go into this course of like, there's so much going on in soul music that's like very cool and it's like really sweet. And I really dig what's going on right now. But I just wanted to make sure I was like, I don't want to go that way because that's where so much is right now. And I really love that. But because there's so much of that right now, I want to go over here and make sure I'm exploring these other things that I think people have forgotten about. And so like Prove My Love to You is totally like a song where it's like, hey, you remember this? Remember like this coolness? Like, remember these Aretha Franklin records? How it was like big and then it kind of just like ducked down and she would just sing the hippest shit ever. And I don't know. It was like, this record was definitely a statement for me of like, hey man, let's not forget all these colors in this crayon box that we get to play with, because it's like, there's so much great stuff. So like this record is really about me digging deeper into that crate and that 45 box and being like, man, I forgot about all these other cool records, and having something like the arrangement of a song like Chosen Few. It's like something that's just quirky. It just like stops and then it gets slow and it's instrumental for a minute. And like, because there are 45s you find, you're like, this is so strange. Like, how did they think of this weird arrangement? And so there were moments where I was like, let's do some shit like that. Let's really push some walls down and not get so stuck in like, hey, well, this is what everyone's doing. Like, this is what everybody wants. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I love that stuff too. But man, I just feel like I'm going down this, I feel like I'm just following everybody. It's like, because that's what happens, right? Like you go down a path and first you're the leader, not meaning you're the better one, you're the leader. But it's like, I was making a lot of sweet stuff back in like 16 and 2017. So it's like, I love those records. I'll always make a sweet love song and like vocal soul and all. I love that stuff. It's my heart. But to just continue to do it, like any artist will tell you, like, hey, Miles Davis don't want to keep playing Bitches Brew, or, you know what I mean, Kind of Blue, or, and that's just how, so this record is very much me trying to just be like, hey, do you love soul music? Because I love soul music, and guess what's a big part of soul music? Gospel, and the church, and like, that brimstone, like, and like, I'm not, this isn't, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay to get a little upset, a little emotional, a little passionate. So that's my spiel, Jim.
Well, it definitely comes across. I mean, it does. It feels like a nice sub of 45s. And I mean, like if there's a word that sums up to me, it's conviction, right? There's a grit to it. There's a conviction to what's going on there. There's you talk about the church. It's definitely there. But it's done also in that way of it doesn't overstay its welcome. I mean that there's a again, that idea of that compactness to it. There's so much still there, and going back to that idea of production, it just I feel that throughout the duration of the record. Speaking of songs and selection and order like that, super excited to see you live this time around on the solo tip. I know you're doing a bunch of in-stores. You got an in-store tomorrow in Columbus, right? At
Gonna be Indianapolis, right?
Yeah, Luna in Indianapolis. I saw you coming to Milwaukee
Yep.
or Louisville and stuff like that. So, and I know that you're doing shows with like Parlor Greens in New York in November. Um, when it comes to, obviously this is going to be, the bread and butter here, but, as you're putting together your set for, maybe not necessarily for the in-stores, but for like the, live shows, how do you make those choices in terms of what you're covering from here?
Oh,
Obviously, some folks are going to want to hear monophonic work. How do you make those selections? And
I mean,
and and and
I made a
keep
decision
yourself happy.
back in 2000 when I first started doing the solo stuff that, for the sake of respecting monophonics and what it is, I don't play monophonics at my shows because I want it to be like, hey, that's monophonics. And, it's not like I would be like, hey, we're at a monophonics show. I'm going to start playing Catch Me I'm Falling. It's like, it's two
Sure.
different worlds, and I like to kind of separate them. So trust me, people show up and, they want to hear It's Only Us. And I'm like, hey, I love the song too, and I'd love to play it for you, but you'll have to come back. And
Yeah. Yeah. It's my time.
I think some people are
In
like,
this work.
I
Yeah.
don't understand. It's your song. It's like, well, it's just a kind of like, it's nice to just have boundaries with those two things and do this when it's this and do that when it's that.
Yeah.
So, but it is hard because I'm only allowed a certain amount of time, 75 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever the set is. So yeah, when you start to pick through the first record and the new record, there's obviously emphasis on the new record because that's what's new and that's what I'm kind of showcasing. But yeah, I mean, I've got some different 45s like Leave You Alone and some stuff with the sentiments and just different things I've kind of done. So it definitely gets hard and you start, and you kind of make the set and you present it, and then someone in the band will be like, oh, that song's not on there, huh? We're not playing it. You're like, oh, damn. I did that today. They're like, oh, so we're not playing this, huh? I guess we could. Let's see how, it's like, I feel bad. Like, I'm sorry. You're right. It's hard, man. And I know that, listen, I want to be able to play all the songs people want to hear, but that's another hard thing. As your discography grows, which is a blessing, it also means, unfortunately, people do come to the show and go, oh, you didn't play, and you feel bad. It's like, I'm sorry, we haven't played that. And I mean, monophonics, I just announced to the crowd this last show we played, we've literally been playing Last One Standing for 6 years straight. So listen, this is it for a little bit, y'all.
Yeah.
Put this one on the shelf for a second. Let it, like, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
as a band, like, we love that song. But it's just like, people got to understand, it's okay to give it a break.
Well, you want it to be fresh and engaging when you play it too. You don't want it to sound like you've been playing this song every show for the last 6 years. I mean, you want the audience to get that feel and that pop that you're getting from playing it and the band playing it together too. So that totally makes sense.
There's definitely a compromise where, yeah, we're aware of what people want to hear and we want to give that to them. Yeah. But like you said, you also need to keep things fresh and rotate songs in and out. And it's for the sake of the show and your own sanity.
Fair.
All right.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Terry, I wanted to kind of ask you because I believe that your connection to Coal Mine and Terry is quite special. What do you remember about that initial meeting? And what do you remember about that version of Terry? I remember he wasn't really ready to release an LP at that point. What made you decide to roll with Coal Mine as opposed to going with perhaps another established label? As you mentioned, around that time, there was a lot booming on the soul scene with other labels. But why Terry? Why Coal Mine? And what do you remember about that version of Terry?
It's funny. There was something about, first off, I found Terry on YouTube. You know what I mean? That was, I'll never forget that, like going down the rabbit hole. Like, YouTube had only been around a few years at that point. This is 2010. So I see this, Ikebe Shakedown 45.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, good. Like looking at it, like, is this new? Is this old? Like, there's no dates. And then it's like, okay. See another one. I think it was Jive Turkeys. Listen to that. I was like, okay, cool. More in the Peters vibe. Like, all right, what's the deal with this? Started looking around and found him on MySpace. Yeah, literally. Isn't that funny?
Man.
But I think at that point, I also found him on like Facebook. So I can't remember if I initially was talking to him on my Facebook, but whatever. I found him online and just basically was like, "Hey, man, I dig what you do." You know, obviously I didn't know him. There wasn't a lot of information about him. It's like, "Hey, I dig what you do. Are you looking to release other things? Like, you know, kind of like what? How does this work? Do I send you something? Like, what's the deal?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just like very mellow, you know, over the email." Yeah, record something and send it to me. If I want to release it, I will. It's just like, okay, seems pretty straightforward. Like, but just like anything, it's like, I don't know him. I don't think we spoke on the phone until right before I went and we did the recording. So I think it was just one of those things where you're like, oh man, just like anything, like it doesn't matter if it's a guy in the basement. You're just like, this guy's got a label. Like, he's putting records out. It's cool. So I think there was definitely a little bit of like, oh wow, we got to make this good. Like, we want this guy to put this out. Like, and once I spoke to him on the phone and kind of got his story, talking to Terry was like, oh, I know Terry's like, my dad's from Ohio. Like, I have cousins and uncles, and I know people like Terry. Like, his rhythm, his sense of humor, his just overall, like, just nice guy, humble, like, very smart, very low key, you know, witty. You know, there's just like a lot to Terry. And so I definitely was like, oh, I know who this guy is. Like, this is not some like labeled guy. Like, he's not a big shot, someone who's trying to be a big shot or like BSing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying is on the level. The deal was really good. It was very much like, hey, we're partners. You know, I'm paying for stuff, but once I recoup, we'll split it. So I was like, that was very attractive. And very fair in the sense of, you know, I don't own this now. It wasn't just like, yeah, go record this and then give it to me. He could have taken, in the early days, the thing that I commend Terry about is like, he really could have just taken advantage of a lot of young and hungry people. Like, if you look back, now we've grown into these artists, but it's like, he would own records by me and Surefire and Ghost Funk and like all these like
Jones
that are now well, and it's like, he was always very honest. He was always fair. And I think that's the biggest thing that's so admirable about, like, he continues to be the same person. He's only smarter. He only knows more. He's like, Terry is so like, he's super grounded, and he's like, I know Terry's a competitive guy, but he really plays it really cool in a competitive business. And I see him, and you're just like, you want to see him flex, and he just won't. You're just, damn it, you're too nice. You know what I mean? It's like, this guy's I mean, I kid. I'm glad Terry is a sweetheart, but he just really is such a down-to-earth dude. And, you know, we started working with him, and we continued to work with him, and we wanted to put out records with him, and he was just straight up. He was like, I'm not ready for this. I can't handle this. I don't have the right distribution. I don't know what I'm doing. Just selling 45. So once I saw the jump off with Durand, it was like, oh, he's fully equipped. Now he has the tools. He's experienced it. He's gaining more knowledge. He's gaining more connection. And, you know, he's getting all the right things. And it's really cool because, you know, Terry was with Fat Beats, and they were doing a great job in the beginning. But I was with Terry right when he signed the distribution deal with Secret. And my record and Neil's record, I think, were the first record, Neil Francis. Those records were like the first. And that was the catapult of like, hey, Coal Mine now has like I said, Fat Beats does a great job, but Secretly is just on another level. Where they're able to get records and their connections. So that was a big moment. You know, watching Terry grow. I mean, to answer your question, Wax, it's like, I don't really think I ever looked at like, oh, I go give Gabe or Leon, I could just give them my music and like they'll sign me. It's like, no. Those guys, they built a beautiful thing. All of them, they do their own thing. They do things a lot more in-house though too. So I think there was a lot of like, well, I like to do my own stuff. I want some creative control. Like I write. So going over to those other labels, as attractive as it seemed like, oh well, you don't really get to just go over there and make your own records. Like now they've allowed that, they've grown into that and having outside producers. But at first it was very much like, hey, if you come in this circle, you're doing it our way and we're in charge. So Terry, I think that's what really separates Terry from those other two labels. Not to say there's anything better. It is different in the sense of like, for years, Daptone, Penrose, Truth and Soul, Big Crown, it was very like, hey, we mold this, you do it this way. Where Terry was like, hey, you go make your record. Just let me know when it's finished. You know, he's a little bit more hands-on nowadays. But I just mean, he's always been very trusting, and it's really like his track record, very impressive. He's put so good 45, so many good albums. He's covered so many cool bands, so many cool. I mean, very impressive.
Yeah, and you're spot on with that. I can remember when we had the Altons on, and they just talked about this gruesome session where they were in there for hours until it sounded a certain way.
Yeah,
and that's the Penrose way, But and at the same time, I've heard many stories from Pale J to Aaron about that freedom that Terry gives, and he kind of makes these gentle suggestions at the right moment, and they're usually winning suggestions. But I love that. Terry's one of my favorites on the scene. I love the brand of business that he represents, and I think it's reflected in the artists and the quality of the work. We got two more, and then we'll wrap things up. I picked up, a few songs from the catalog. I'd love it if you just kind of say a word, or maybe there's a memory or something like that you can share.
sure.
I will always remember when I heard Only Us, the acoustic version. It was during the pandemic.
Oh,
Times were kind of low, brother, if I'm being honest with you. And man, the morning that came out and the world heard it, I can tell you in my house, that was a moment. That was a rock of hope for many of us to lean on. So when you reflect back on it, I would just kind of love to know what's top of mind for you. And the acoustic version.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I love certain songs just speak to me in terms of like, hey, this song really needs to be put under a bigger microscope. Like, let's really just show people the bare bones of what this song is, because that's what songs are. It's like, like if you can sit down and play a song on a piano or just a guitar, it's like that's the true essence of that song.
Sure.
I mean, everything else is, you can make bad songs sound cool. But ruin a really good song with overproducing or like bad, just bad vibes, whatever it is. So, I mean, that song just, it brought a lot of people a lot of different things, and that's proven to be a very important song to a lot of people. A lot of people, that's their first dance. It'll be a song that connected them with someone who's important in their life, a family member or a loved one, a partner. So, I mean, yeah, that really just, I don't know. There definitely is, I think you used the right word. There's just definitely just like a hopeful feeling in that performance. And it's always nice to just kind of play a song that people know in a more, in a way that's more exposed.
I love that. Tom's Heartbreak. When I heard that, I was like, man, this brother's cooking on a new level. Talk to us about that one.
Tom's Heartbreak is really just my homage to the Delphonics and Tom Bell. I mean, it's just like I love, the Delphonics just have a special part, and like someone like Tom Bell, his story is fascinating to me. He was born in Jamaica, came over to America as a young boy, taught himself about music, and ended up creating a genre called Philly Soul along with Gamble and Huff. And like those melodies, and it just, that started off as kind of something else, and then it got pulled into another direction. And then as I sat and listened to a lot of the music and stuff, I was like, you know what? It never was going to be a vocal tune. I was like, it'd be cool if like falsetto of Tom Bell, if it was flute, because that's very much what that like soprano falsetto thing feels like.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I don't know. It was just like wanting to just kind of play. Like I said, like, as you get in the studio and you keep going and you keep going, you just think of new ways to just be like, hey, I haven't done this. Hey, let's try this. I mean, I'm doing something like that right now. That's just kind of like, it's a little in that vein of like the Tom's Heartbreak, where it's just like, oh yeah, but it's something like totally different. So let me try this. Like it's the challenges that's inspiring. You know what I mean? It's just constantly trying to look at it and be like, man, I want to keep things interesting. I want to keep, like you said, I want to keep things cooking. So Tom Bell, man, everybody should. Tom Bell, he is such. He was such a special arranger and musician.
I love it, man. You're spitting gold. Now, I refuse to call this a Christmas album. To me, this is the chronic of all Christmas albums, but something that I listen to year round, man. But
Absolutely.
what I loved most was Heartbreak for Christmas, and I'll tell you why. When you open with those drums, that I'm like, ooh, Kelly's channeling like the hip hop version of Kelly. And then you just go into such a feel good song. I mean, every time I put that on, and especially during Christmas, just that feel good vibe. So what comes to mind when I talk about this bad boy right here?
That is literally, I would put that in as like one of the fastest songs I ever wrote. That really came fast. And when I started to write it, I knew how much I loved it. I had this moment. It's funny. I mean, once I committed to the Christmas record, I kind of committed, but that was one of those moments where I didn't sit down to really write a Christmas song. I just started kind of like messing around and writing something. And then I was like, man, this is good. Like, this might be too good for a Christmas song. Like trying to convince myself. And I was like, you know what? Fuck that. Like, that's how it needs to be.
Yeah.
It needs that all
And
the time.
that's the appeal of that record, man. I mean, it
That's
definitely it's over the holiday.
Not a Christmas song. So I just stayed there at the piano, and it was done with and in under an hour, and that's fast for me. I don't like write songs super fast, so if I can write it in under an hour, and I had like the concept and most of the words, and yeah, I mean that just felt great. I got it tracked really fast. I got Max in to play bass on it. I sent it to Terry. Terry was like, dude, this is amazing. Like, that definitely just lit a fire that it was like, okay, we're on to something. We can make a cool Christmas record. So that was a big moment for sure.
Okay. I gotta flash this real quick. Do you know if this is expired by chance? Can we still brew this?
I do know people that still brew that, and they have not passed away. So okay. I think it'll be okay.
All right. Before I ask my question, I just want to shine the light. I don't know if people understand the greatness that comes from the Finnigan family.
Oh, man.
Kelly, I had no idea that your mother is Candy. We've been watching Candy like way before I even got onto the indie scene, so I had to shout that out, man. But
thanks, man,
I called my wife. I said, "Yo, you're not gonna believe who this brother's mother is."
My mom is. For those that don't know, yes, my mom has saved many lives. My mom has been working in and around recovery since I want to say like 93, in terms of like helping people, going out to high schools, talking to kids in groups, going out doing interventions, going out helping people just get sober, get their life together, get on track, get into rehabs, get into programs that'll help them get their family into Al-Anon. So yeah, she's doing a bigger she's got a bigger purpose for people. Extremely proud. I mean, she's a warrior, man. She crushes it, and she's still doing it. Like, you can't I'm trying to be like, yo, you need to chill, like, enjoy yourself. You've been hustling for a long time, but she really loves helping people, and she'll get really gassed that that you knew about her before anything.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean,
like, I'll say this, it was really cool to see that happened to my mom because it happened later in her life. And, you know, when people start to get recognized in public, like when you're older, she would just be like, these people, you know, she would get so excited. I was like, this is so cool to watch your mom kind of become this, you know, small little TV star. That was very cool. So thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. My last question, I ask all my guests this: is there a quote, a mantra that you keep close to heart, that you think about through good times and bad times? I mean, everything you said tonight is like a quotable to a degree, man. And so I would just love to hear that quote or mantra, maybe.
Well, there's a few I would say. I mean, one, I would obviously say, like, you know, the one thing I learned a long time ago was like, make sure you're art that you love. Like, first and foremost, like, serve your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Feel good enough about sharing that, well, then do it. If you don't want to, it's okay. There's no pressure. But I mean, beyond that, I have a little piece of paper that I've had for like, man, since I was like 13. And I can't recite the whole thing, but it's really about commitment, and it's about showing up day after day.
Yeah. Oh, oh.
Like, just like, you know, actions speak louder than words. Like, make the sacrifices, put in the time, like, do the things, commit, and if you do, you'll see results. And that is huge. And then, you know, just understanding that, like, in this business, you can't control things. You know, you got to, you know, accept the things that you can't control, and you know what I mean, and know and have the courage to change the things that you know you have the power to change things that you can. But sometimes you just got to accept the things you can't change. And, like, you know, we're all out here trying to make a name and be successful and do our own thing, but at the end of the day, it's like, you know, your personal happiness is way bigger than your success. You know, it's like, if you're happy, that's way more important than anything. Like, love what you do, appreciate the fact that you're able to make art and share it, or be able to, you appreciate whatever you do in your life, whether that's raise children or be an architect or a nurse or you cut hair, whatever you do, like, do it with love, appreciate, you know, all the moments.
I love that. I love that. Kelly, I just want to thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah.
You know, your music came into my life at a really important time, and every time I played your records, you know, whether it was the instrumentation, you know, those dynamic, soulful vocals that you feel, you don't listen to, you make music that you can feel. I just appreciate everything, and I know that I meant what I said when I said you have a global presence and you've brought us all together through, you know, your soulful sounds. So thank you so much. I want to wish you the absolute best success with the new
Thank you.
release. We will continue to champion everything that you do. We're big supporters. But I want to just give you some space to say last minute words, let folks know when they can shop the record, and how we can stay connected with all things Kelly Finnigan.
Yes, thank you very much again for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and Jim. I appreciate your time. I appreciate what you both do. For those that don't know, Jim actually wrote the bio for the record, and it was really cool to work with him on that. He did an excellent job. He's a really great writer. I encourage people to check out his work. You know, I just want to say, make sure, I want to shout out myself, but I want to make sure, like, to give some love once again to the musicians who help with the record. That's Jay Mumford. He's got a great band called The Do Rights. He's got great breakbeat records he puts out. Of course, like I said, Max Ramey, who has the Ironsides. He also plays with Monophonic. Joe Ramey, his brother, plays with me, Ironsides. Of course, the great Jimmy James, who I think I saw his name on here. Incredible, one of the best guitarists around right now, and a great guy. Of course, Joe Crispiano, all the horn players, Eric Johnson from the Sinceres, Paul Chandler, Jason Cressy, Alex Backey, Daniel Casares, Mike Olmos, all the string players, Shayna, her whole crew, just all the musicians. I want to make sure people understand that, like, nobody does anything alone. All these musicians are so important. Kamiko and Vivica. Yeah, stay connected. I'm on Instagram. You know, I'm on Facebook a little bit. I don't make it on there so much these days, but I'm around. You know, I got some shows coming up in California. November 14th, San Francisco. November 15th, Los Angeles. November 16th, San Diego. You can find those dates on the internet if you Google. And I got a European tour next year. I'm excited to share the record. It comes out this Friday. It's kind of like I was telling my girl, my girl that I was like, yeah, it's kind of always this weird feeling of like you're excited, but you're kind of scared. Not like scared, but you're just like, oh God, I don't want to disappoint people. You know what I mean? It's like, because I know right now I'm blessed. Like it's really doing well. Like the shops are buying it, and I really hope that the shops push the records out the door. That's what we want. Obviously, it's exciting to get the orders out and get the bins filled in the stores, but we definitely want people walking out with the record. So support your local record, please. Stream it, all that stuff, but buy physical music. Buy physical music. It is the way of the future, kids.
Couldn't have put it better. Mr. Jim, any last minute words before we take off?
Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to hang. This is, as someone who's watched a ton of these, to actually be, in the riding shotgun for this conversation, it was a pleasure. And yeah, definitely, y'all need to hop on this. It will not disappoint. Let me just put that out there. And Kelly, thank you again for the opportunity to also be part of the conversation and to share space tonight with y'all. This has been fantastic.
It's been a good time. I appreciate you guys.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody who stayed on the line, all 27 of you, for the hour and almost 30-minute fireside chat. Waxvillain, Seattle, Washington. We're out of here. Take care, everyone.
Peace.
Later.